Do you want to live your life with intention? Most people would answer, of course. But how do we do that amidst looming deadlines, family responsibilities, and unexpected curveballs? Well, in her new book, The Intentional Life, author and coach Cristina Slabic teaches us what it means to abide in Christ and how that abiding allows us to design and live a life on purpose. Join me today on the Entrusted to Lead podcast, where I sit down with my good friend Cristina to talk about her faith and coaching journey, her heart to help others live with intention, and her brand new book. So grab your cup of coffee or favorite beverage, and let's get started. Doing things alone is entirely overrated. We all need a community to thrive. And that's why I'm part of an online community of writers and speakers, podcasters, and entrepreneurs called Creatives. And I love it. In the years since I joined this community, I've launched new ideas, and I finally executed the dreams that sat on the shelf for years. Seriously. And I was able to do this because of the outstanding group of mentors, exceptional training, and encouraging mastermind groups with my new friends who did and continue to give me invaluable feedback. Oh, and not to mention all the fun, because we have had lots and lots of fun. Have you ever said, I want to write a book? Or do you want to use your voice for the exciting world of podcasting? If so, Called Creatives is your best resource for up-to-the-minute industry training, expert advice, live coaching, and peer support like no other. Best-selling authors and speakers Allie Worthington and Lisa Whittle lead this community with a no-competition mission, and it shows. So join my friends and I in the Called Creative community. Head to my show notes, danitacummins.com/podcast, and click the link to get all the details to join. I promise you won't regret it. I look forward to seeing you in the community and watching you grow. Hey friends, welcome to the Entrusted to Lead podcast. I'm your host, Danita Cummins, and today on this episode, I am joined by my friend and fellow author, Cristina Slabic. She is an intentionality speaker and coach, a mom and a wife, and a fellow member of Called Creatives. And she and I met like 2 years ago, maybe, I think it was, at a retreat. I can't even remember.
Something like that.
And I've always admired her commitment to her faith and her family and just the way she shows up in the world. So I am so excited that she came on today to talk about her new book, The Intentional Life, Cultivate Confidence, Build Boundaries, and Protect Your Peace, which is available now on Amazon for purchase. So if you want to go over there and grab it, please do. I have my own copy right here, my desk. It's super awesome. So Cristina, good morning, friend. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. Just trying to enjoy summer. It's so hot. I'm in Texas and it is so hot. So hot already.
Yeah. My mom's in Oklahoma and she sent a screenshot of the weather app this week and it was like 100 degrees every day or something. Is that how hot it is down there?
Yeah, it was in the low hundreds yesterday when we were out doing some errands. It's like 86 now and it's morning. So it's only starting. It's preheating.
Yeah, that's for sure. I think by August, North Carolina is like a swamp, like the ground just steams in the morning. So, wow. Well, before we jump into all the things about your new book, I wanted to ask you, can you explain what an intentionality coach is for the audience if they don't know?
Yes. So I call myself an intentionality coach. And for a while, I was saying I was a time management and productivity coach. So that's kind of underlying that. But I wanted to be more specific and say intentionality coach because I want to help someone who's finally ready to get to all those important things that they never seem to get to. I help them prioritize and focus, help them avoid distractions. I help them bounce back after the inevitable interruptions of life. And so the people that work with me, they're finally ready to get things done. They're ready to finally take the time for what's important. They're ready. That's one thing too. At first, I was trying to convince people that they needed my help. And now I realize, no, when they're ready, they'll know.
Yeah.
And so
right.
I just help them unjumble everything that's in their mind. Like that overwhelming feeling where you don't even know where to begin. Like right. I can come in and I help them sort that and prioritize it and then have a game plan. And then, accountability once they get moving.
Do you find with your clients, do they have a specific problem that they're trying to solve? Or is it more just this overwhelming feeling of frustration where they don't know where to go and they've just had enough? Like, what is that point where they get to where they're kind of like, okay, now I need to phone a friend. Like, now I know I need help.
Right. It seems that the people that I've worked with have a lot going on. Many are entrepreneurs, and so they have complete control over their schedule. And
Yeah.
yet they are all over the map, and no one's telling them when to be to work, when to do this, when to do that. They're having to make those decisions. And so
Right.
sometimes they're out of whack, right? They're spending too much at work. Their family life is suffering because there's no boundaries for work time. And so when there's no boundaries, it also makes you very inefficient. And so it's usually people that have a lot of control over their schedule and are very frustrated because they know they should be doing better. And they almost feel like they have the agency to do better, and yet they're stuck. They see it all happening and then they feel kind of at a loss for how to start, how to begin. It's overwhelming.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, my husband is working on his workshop and we're in the process of reorganizing everything. So I'm just imagining while you're talking, like, the life resembling my husband's workshop right now with all of his tools everywhere. And he's
Yeah.
just like, you don't even know what systems you might need or what processes you need to put into place because it's just so many things all over the place.
That's a really good analogy that I used before that I help people do for their time, what like organizers do for space, which is
Right.
you take everything out and you look at it and assess it, and then you have to sort it and group it and figure out how you're going to use it. When are you going to use this time? What is the priority? Like, what are you going to do first? What are the things that you have to reserve time for and protect time for? And then not
Yeah.
everything fits back in. There's things where you're like, that's
Mm.
not going to make it back in. Like, that's
Yeah.
gotta go. And so, yeah, it's very,
Yeah.
very good. It's a good analogy.
Yeah, I love that. And then helping them find clarity, right? Is kind of what you're saying, the clarity and like, what do I want to do? What is
Mm-hmm.
important to me? What do I actually value?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I just did a podcast this week about self-care, and it's really kind of talking like that too. Like, we imagine work-life balance in all these equal buckets, but life's not this equal bucket thing. And then you've got to try to manage all those, which we always talk about as friends. And then you're also struggling to try to figure out really the question I think you go back to is, what do you value? Like, what is actually
Mhm.
important? Yeah.
That's exactly
How do
right.
you define success? Yeah. So
Yeah.
good. Okay. So you've been doing that for how long? Being a coach?
It's been an evolution, but in 2019 is basically when everything got started. At the end of 2018, I just gathered some friends to try and kind of do a goal setting time and share with them my process, and just because they're my friends. And one of them was insistent that I be her coach to implement this plan that she had put together. She's like, I know I want this. I don't know how I'm going to do it. And so I'm like, okay. And so I lovingly refer to her in my notes sometimes as client zero. Like, that's where it all began. Cause she's like, you got to do this. I'm like, what? And so really that's in 2019 is when it started, that launched with that one client.
That's so exciting. So you've been doing that for now 4 or 5 years, 6 years. And
5.
the 5, yeah. And the math is hard. And I was like 21 too. Yeah. And then your book came out. Was that the book, the inception of the book? Was that from just these things that the Lord was showing you and these like challenges that your clients were having? Or where did really this concept for the book come from?
Well, I think even just now that we were talking about how you have to begin with your values, right? Like when you're making these decisions, I would start working with them at the very granular day to day, week at a time. What are you doing? But I would say to them, well, you have to have some goals because that'll inform your day to day decisions. And so I always enjoy that kind of an annual process of setting goals. And honestly, the last few times I'm thinking I'm going to do them more often and do these workshops, and I've started doing them virtually. And so it's not even in person, of course, in person was so fun right after COVID, but also virtually, and just saying, let's set goals because that becomes the way you can filter your decisions, right? If something comes toward you and you're like, that's not consistent with the goal, and then it's an easy no. Or if something comes at you and you're like, yeah, that's what I've been saying I want to do. So yes, that's what I'm going to go, make this decision. And so I would help with the day to day and the planning and the kind of nitty gritty. And then I would also talk to people about goals. And then I got to a point where I was like, but something's informing that, even the goals, right? And so that's where that word values comes in, and where my faith was important, because how you define success in the world is one way. But if you have a kingdom mind of what success is and what's important, and you think of eternity and you think of the things God said in his word in the Bible, that also affects your decisions for your goal setting and for your day to day. And it all filters. And so I kept going kind of further upstream. So your daily decisions, yeah, you can make good decisions, but you can't be very strategic until you think like a week at a time. And then really you got to think about the quarter, and then you got to think about the year. And so my latest training that I'm probably going to do a retreat in September is a life plan, which is kind of a 10-year horizon. And again, all informed by who we are, our identity as children of God, our purpose in the world, what we're feeling called to do. And then realizing again that we're walking hand in hand with a God that can say, no, we're going to change course. And so the book is that. It's kind of the foundational stuff that's kind of higher view of how we plan. And my thought is that if someone reads this book and sees, oh yeah, this is all these foundational pieces that go in place, then they're ready to do the work of planning and being intentional with their time kind of day to day.
Yeah, I love that. Because sometimes, like you're saying, we need a better task management system, which you might need a better task management system, right? To kind of filter out the to-dos, but you get so far down in the to-dos every day that you wake up one day and you really are questioning that, like, what am I doing? Like, where am I going?
Right.
What is the point? Yeah.
I think it's Peter Drucker, who was a business coach in, I think maybe even in the 50s. And he's like, there's nothing more inefficient than doing efficiently what shouldn't be done at all.
That's right.
So you can be super productive in a day and get a lot of things done. But if you're doing the wrong things, you're not being productive or truly efficient. Or as I say in my book, fruitful. You're just spinning your wheels.
Yeah. Yeah. You're checking the boxes and getting the things done. But just moving the water back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good. That's so good. In your book, you use this framework, the ABIDE, ABIDE framework. And you say in there, right, to help us remember how to remain in Him. So do you want to explain those elements and why you think that they are important in building an intentional life?
I think when I was reading God's word and looking for how to be truly productive, right? I saw that word fruitful and I was like, that's the thing. That's what I want. I want to yield fruit. I want my life to produce things that will last forever. And the Bible says that's what fruitfulness is. And so it says, abide in me and I in you. And, I was like, what does that mean? What does that mean? And so I was just kind of captivated by that word. I have been for years. And God just started to show me as I was developing this idea of, no, it has to start with God. And I started using that word just to create a framework of A is adoring God first. He's preeminent. It begins with Him. And then B is believing truth. So if I am adoring Him, worshiping Him, thinking about Him, putting Him first, and believing what He says in His word about who He is and who I am, then that sets me up already to be in the right kind of mindset. And then, of course, I have to interpret my life rightly. That's the I. Interpret what has happened in my life as training for what He has for me in the future. Maybe discipline to correct me. Interpreting my life through the lens of the fact that I adore Him and He's good and He says these things about me and He's made me for a reason, right? So then whatever happens is like Romans 8:28 says, it's going to be for His glory, my good. And so it's kind of those things are getting put in place, layering them. And then the D is, again, dreaming with God, which is that goals piece that I talked about. When we're setting goals, we want to be setting goals that honor Him. So, of course, the dreaming with God, I've heard a lot of friends, they talk about dreams, God-shaped dreams, God-sized dreams, God-directed, dreams. And they're just big things that look impossible apart from God. Those are the goals that I had been looking at in my secular search for how to set good goals. It's like goals really should inspire you to do something beyond yourself. And if I have all this background and foundational work of God is for me, God has made me, God has prepared works for me. So then if He inspires me to look at this thing that He wants me to tackle or move toward, that's a little scary, I can trust Him because of all of that background, right?
That's right.
And so I can set a goal that's very big. It's a dream. And it requires that He be present, that He show up, that people join me, that it's not just me, it's others, that I grow and develop. And then the E is, of course, the exercise obedience. Like all of that has been fine and dandy, but you got to do the work. And so again, that's where I started with my work is let's be intentional with our time and not waste our life, not just twiddle our thumbs or not just do busy work, but let's do work that counts, that matters. And so that's the E, like, okay, he's shown you all these things. Now exercise obedience, like put one foot in front of the other, stay with him, abide with him, continue to adore him, continue to believe what he says, continue to interpret your life, and just one step in front of the other. And it's all a layer and a continual thing. Because I am an engineer by education, and my mind is always asking, but how? What's the how? Jesus tells you lots of things, and everyone is always asking him, but how do we do that? What do we need to do? So that's very human nature. And for me, I just needed some handles around this idea of how do I abide? How do I abide? Well, I'm continually connected to him. I remain in him. He remains in me. Like if his word's in me, then he's remaining,
Yeah.
So it's just, again, continual state of being, not just a formula one time and you're done forever.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. That is so good. I love the way you explained it too. Just it does sound very systematic and very, it's easy to understand. And as you're talking, and I kind of have an inside track because I've, have had the book and gone through parts of it with you before, but I'm just thinking, yeah, like makes perfect sense. So then the question is, why don't we do that? Right.
Yeah.
Like then the question becomes, why don't we? Like, what do we see? Do you think there are any roadblocks or stumbling blocks that you saw or you see repeating that are common for people that keep them from doing this, other than just kind of butt in the seat doing the work? But
Right. Well, I mean, I think every one of the pieces of the framework has something that the temptation to do the opposite, right?
Sure.
We forget who God is and we don't worship him as we should, right? We're forgetful. Humans are forgetful. So we start to put something else above God. We idolize something else, right?
Yeah.
We change the order. And so then that creeps in and affects everything, kind of trickling down. We then are not in his word. We're not spending time in his word. We're not putting it in our heart so that we would not sin against God. Like we're doing these things that they kind of starve us. It starves our prayers. It starves our faith if we're not in him, in his word.
That's right.
And then we believe the lies of the enemy. We have a real enemy that wants us to think that the hard things that happen in our life are because God doesn't love us or we deserve it or there really is no God or whatever the lie is. Instead of thinking, no, all this is coming through the hand of God for a good reason. And I maybe don't understand it, but I trust him. But the enemy's like, no, like all the stuff Job's friends threw at him, right?
Yeah.
And then the dreaming part, like, of course we get afraid. And for me, a lot of my story is in the book about how I start to second guess. Well, is that my idea? Or is that really God's idea? Or, am I being selfish to think this? Or just that self-doubt of thinking, who am I to have this dream? Or who am I to want to do that? And so I think that's the thing that keeps us from dreaming is that we have self-doubt or we have fear or we assume things about the world, like that's never going to happen. No one's ever going to want to join me in this adventure. Or one that's insidious is when we have a dream and then we meet someone that has a dream very similar. For a long time, I would think, oh, I don't need to do it because that person's doing it. It's covered. Instead, now what I think is they're doing it. I'm doing it. Let's join forces. Let's collaborate and do it together and help each other do it in our spheres, right? Because that person has their audience. I have my audience. And we can actually help each other. We're not competition. We are brothers and sisters in Christ, and we're trying to expand the kingdom. And so we can collaborate. And so these are lies, again, that the enemy's like, if I can keep everyone thinking they're alone in their own little dream, and if someone else took their dream, they stole it, and then they're not going to be able to do it now, like, it's insidious, right? Because it's discouraging. Because I think we all want to be so clever and be the first to think of something. But he tells us there's nothing new under the sun. Right. It's a mindset tweak to think, no, we're all been called to do something. And sometimes you're called to do something very similar to somebody else. And that's not a threat. That's a help. And then, of course, then just interruptions of life, they can derail us. And then, it's all our thinking. And it's hard. it's inertia and just us not wanting to do stuff and life going to chaos, all those things. It's hard. You have to daily make the decision. Okay, today I'm believing you, God. I'm trusting you. I don't know what it's going to look like. And as every time I plan with my clients and I say, okay, here's our plan for the week. We hold it up to God and we say, okay, God, this is how I want to be obedient to what you show me. But if something blows up in my week or there's a fire I need to put out, I trust you to help me rearrange it. And I trust you.
Yeah.
Because we're not in control, but we are. Like, it's that tension of like, we're not in control, but we do have agency.
So
I think that's why we can't, at any point of those things, it falls apart and we don't abide. And then affects the others, It's hard to remain.
Yeah.
I had a friend that, I think it's a commentary on, I think it's also in Romans, a verse about being living sacrifices. Right? Like, it's like the thing about living sacrifices is that you get off the altar. Like, you want to crawl off the altar. You don't want to be a living sacrifice. You want to continue to be like, no, never mind.
Yeah.
So
that's very true. I have a dear friend, mentor of mine for years in the pregnancy help ministry, and she passed away in February. And I have that in my journal the week that she passed away. Just that, like it says in the scriptures where it talks about the pouring out, right? Where we pour out ourselves, or the pouring out for the glory of God and the different things. And I just was like, I looked at her life and the unbelievable obedience and the unbelievable sacrifice and the unbelievable joy that she had, and the discernment, like the powerful connection she had with the Lord to hear his voice in this intimate, daily, my Jesus said, with this confidence and this, like, she was one of these, like, you met her the first time and it was just like, she was like a force to be reckoned. You know what I mean? Like, every person who's ever met her one time was like, do you know Miss Helen? Like, and when you'd say Miss Helen and they're like, oh, but it was all those things. So like you're saying, you can't have one without the other. And I think that's the, maybe another part of the deception is like it's kind of like that whole mind, body, soul, spirit thing. Like, if you have a gaping chest wound in, physical or spiritual life, then you're not going to be able to fully be like in him, right? All and by and through him. So, but as you were talking, I was just thinking that, but it did her life. It was a great, I say crucible of obedience. Like, it was just the daily that most people would have never seen, and it was her in the quiet, spending time with the Lord. But at the end of her life, just sitting in her funeral and just reflecting on the impact that she made, I was like, she did pour out her life. Like, everything she had got poured back out. And I just thought, what a powerful, testament to the Lord's goodness and his strength. So, do you find that people would, because you talked about fruitfulness first, and I kind of wanted to jump back over that before we go to the next piece, is like the anxiety, I think, that comes from being fruitful, or the stewardship, like that tension, like you said, like we genuinely do want to be good stewards of our life. I think, like, genuinely every single human wants to do good things. I mean, there's this subjectivity, right, I guess, in what good is. But do you see in your study or your work or in your book, like, that people seem to carry this anxiety of it too? Like this, I don't know if I'm being a good steward of the resources that God has given, and I want to be a good steward, and that kind of confusion. Do you see that too?
Yeah, I think it's there. I mean, I think it's there where we're asking the question, and the analogy that God has given us is really so, so helpful, right? Because he talks about fruitfulness. He talks about growth of the vine, and so much of that is hidden work. Like even what you just said about your friend, the growth that is happening underground to build a root system we don't see. And then from the perspective of God, right? The passiveness of the branch to just abide. We're not doing anything in the sense that we're not making it happen. Like, we can't produce fruit like that. Like, we can't force it. It's God's timing. It's God's work through us. We just need to remain. So there's this posture sort of trust in what he's doing and of rest in what he's doing. Rest doesn't mean an activity. Rest is a mindset of, I'm doing what I called to do and I'm waiting on him to produce the fruit.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit, especially I think for Americans, right? Because we're do, to say, I am going to do and be intentional with what I'm doing, but I'm also not stressing out about the outcome, because that belongs to God. And like I've heard people use that verse about man makes his plans, but the Lord directs his steps or something like that. I should know that one. It's sort of like that where people say, oh, well, God's going to decide anyway, so I don't have to do anything. I'm like, well, that's also, you can also already hear it in the person being like, I'm just going to be passive and not contribute my effort. But what I see in God's word is that we're partnering with him sometimes, and it's a mystery and it's beautiful, and we partner with him in what he's doing in the world, but we're not doing it on our own. But he also, it shows us that sometimes there's things he doesn't do because we're not engaged with him.
Yeah.
Like I think it's in James. It's like, you're not going to get it if you don't ask for it, if you're not doing it. And I talk about goals being like prayers. Like, here's my goal is like what I'm praying, what I want. We have to be engaged and we have to be doing. So I think that's probably an indication if you're starting to get anxiety that something's not happening, that something's off.
Yeah.
That I'm not trusting him. I'm not worshiping him. I'm not resting in who he is and who I am. Kind of all of those things. I think the anxiety is an indication that something's off somewhere. And it's an invitation to be like, hey, and I talk about that at the end part of it about exercising obedience is like, remember you have limits. So I was about to listen actually to the self-care one because that is it. You have limits, God-given limits. They're daily reminders that you are not God. Every time you're hungry, it's a reminder that says, I'm not God. Every time I'm sleepy, every time I'm tired, it's all about reminding me by his grace that I'm not him and that I need him. And so it's about staying in that posture.
Yeah. And I can see how that framework or that posture, like you said, really does bring you a sense of confidence when you can take a step back. I know for me, in my different seasons of my life where I tried to be very intentional about these are the things I'm going to hold. These are the things I'm not going to hold, right? I'm going to make space for these things that I value or that I feel like the Lord has called me to people to serve or, love my family well or take care of myself, like those things and there is a silent confidence or whatever the word where you're just kind of like, you just know there's that be still, peace be still, but it's really just like that. I am being a good steward of the things that the Lord has set before me today. Tomorrow will come and there may be bigger things or there may be more dreams or there might be more books or there might be more or there might not, right? But today in this season, just walking with him, like you said, there does just seem to bring this overwhelming sense of confidence and peace. And you're just like, okay, I'm just, like you said, I'm going to rest in him. I'm going to look at him. I'm going to see him. And then in every day, there's a peace that comes from, just being, we say be still, but be still and still moving, like be still like the duck on the water. Yeah.
Right. And I think I wanted to point out, like even my subtitle for the book, I put Cultivate Confidence. And then the other ones say, build your boundaries, protect your peace. Because for me, the confidence isn't in us. The confidence is in God. So the more you do this, you're cultivating a confidence that God has got you, God is doing things. And then you're protecting your peace because that peace is, what we experience. So it's the confidence is in him. It's God confidence for sure. Because apart from him, we can do nothing, right? Like that's what the verse in John 15 says. Apart from him, you can do nothing. And so the confidence is all about his confidence in him.
Yeah, I think that's so good. When I went on my sabbatical, the pastor that led my workshop shared at the end of the week, he shared this story about how vineyards, whoever owned the vineyards, the vineyard people who maintain them, I guess the vineyard farmers, I don't think that's the technical word, but they intentionally withdraw water from the vineyard to force the root system to go deeper into the ground. And they do it on purpose, right? Because they know if they withdraw the water from the plants, then the root system will go deeper and it will sustain, and that vineyard will be there, right, for a long time, and it'll be able to sustain the droughts and the elements and overcome the elements that are thrown at it. And I just thought that was such a powerful representation as you were talking about the vine. Like, I think sometimes we think about the vine life, I say, the vine life, we should have t-shirts. It's just as the grape on the vine, right? Like you're saying, like you look at the fruit and it's either big or little, or it's, like a raisin, or it's very plump. I don't know, depends on how much it's got. but we forget the root system and the structure and all the things that are going on. So
I want to share a couple of things that came to mind, even before you were talking about the anxiety of producing, and I was at a conference. Jackie Hill Perry did a conference, and she was saying that that you are abiding. She didn't say these words. This is how my memory remembers them, is that the fruit of the Spirit is being produced in the people you are ministering to. So not necessarily, not that I'm producing the fruit, is that the people that I'm ministering to are producing the fruit.
Wow.
So that's like, she was talking like, that's like a test that you are like part of this conduit of God working through you in the life of another, because they're exhibiting the, love, joy, peace, patience, all the characteristics of the fruit is being produced in them.
Yeah.
And so that's like a test of, like, I think, oh, I'm not producing these things, but then I see that people that I'm in Bible study with that we're leading are serving and are loving and are doing all these things. And I'm like, maybe we are, I think I'm still just the branch. I'm not the fruit. I'm just the branch. So
yeah, that's good. And I think that's really important because we are filled with so much self-doubt. Like, I can look at you and talk about all the beautiful traits that I see in you and the way that God, moves through you, or the, beautiful message that, he's placed in the world through you. Like, I can see that, right, as a friend and tell you. But we don't see that in ourselves. And that's part of the great deception, because like you said, the enemy is a real enemy actively trying to take away the authority that we've been given in God, the confidence that we've been given in him, and that our identity is in him and that we're seen by him, right? And so shame and fear and all those things get kind of placed on us, not by him, but by the enemy. So I can see that even in that space too. So I think that was really good for someone who's struggling, who's like, I'm showing up, I'm doing the work, and I don't feel it, right? I don't feel peaceful. I don't feel good. I don't feel joy. Like, I don't, I'm not happy about all of these deadlines and spreadsheets and things that are happening. And, like you said, crisis and family, and I don't feel good. And then that's a great offering to just say, okay, maybe take a step back and look outside yourself and, see what the Lord is doing around you. Yeah. And that can definitely be really good. So what are some practical ways that we've already talked through a few, but is there anything else? You say in the book that you simply want to live in him, by him, and for him, and that our faith in God can fuel the intentional life that we want to have. So are there any other practical ways that you think or see that can happen?
Well, so you gave me a heads up, right, that it was coming. And I went into the chapter of my book that exercise obedience. And I talk about these kind of daily rhythms, weekly rhythms, because I think that is kind of some of the language too that I talk about with clients is like, it's about a rhythm of like almost a choreography, like dance, right? You do these things, you do them faithfully, and it's part of your life. It shouldn't be a chore. Like, it should be something that's just part of you. And that's really what makes you a person that's intentional, right? It's that you are continually doing these things. And so I kind of had, for daily things to do, I have it in that chapter of exercising obedience, is like very practically go to sleep at a regular time.
Oh,
and that's the thing, like,
yes.
I get so practical here at the very end, where I'm like going to coach mode when I work with clients and we're trying to schedule this, figure out a schedule for them, a kind of a template for how their week should go. We always talk about sleep first. Yeah. You have to rest. That is how you worship a God who doesn't sleep, because you sleep and you say, everything is going crazy, God, but I trust you. So I'm going to go to sleep.
Aww.
Like, that's worship, like going to sleep, right? Staying up because you're stressed about everything is saying to God, I have to do it myself.
Well,
so even in that, it's like, go to sleep, choose a bedtime, figure out how much sleep you need to get, set an alarm for going to sleep I always say, instead of an alarm to wake up, set the alarm for going to sleep. Make sure you get up, you spend time in his word. Like, again, because you're continually having to believe what he's saying. Have an attitude of gratitude. That's so cheesy, that little cliche line, but give thanks. Remember what he's done in your day. Even if they're tiny things, like staying in that place of, today felt hard, but this happened and this was good. Like, end your day on a positive and on a remembering who he is and how he provided. Just staying connected with him, again, through prayer of thankfulness or through prayer of help, of saying, Lord, this is happening. Like, something in the middle of a day happens and you're like, Lord, help me. Just staying connected to him. And, some people in different seasons have more time than others. And so when I had little ones and I had no time, I mean, a little 5-minute devotional and something I could ponder is God is not about shaming us for not having time. He knows what we're made of. He knows
That's right.
He knows our seasons. And so just staying connected with him. And then whatever our work is, whether it's feels big and visible or is hidden, like just be faithful in it because he's put you there for that season. He's called you there for that season. And it's not forever and it's going to change. And like, it's that whole thing about the talents. If you're faithful with little, you could get much. And so just faithfully trust him, faithfully work. That's like the daily, right, rhythm. But if he's giving you dreams that are outside of the normal, outside of the whirlwind, as this one book calls it, like everyday life is a whirlwind, but there's things you want to do that are outside of that. Think about when can you spend time thinking about that or working on that, or don't give up on your dreams. A lot of, especially moms, when they're coming out of that time of just thinking of all the things for their kids, keeping them alive and taking care of them and their households. And maybe they're launching a business, or maybe it's, for whatever reason, you're just overwhelmed. They forget to dream when they're just going through the motions of everything else. Stay connected to him because he wants to give you. It's like he'll give you the desires of your heart if you have been working with him so that your heart desires what he wants you to desire.
That's right.
So again, it's all connected, but just very practically spending time. And that's why I started even researching time management 10 years ago. I was like, I want to spend time with God. How do I do this? I have little kids at home. What does that look like? How can I do it? And so that kind of began the search.
Yeah. The journey. Yeah.
The journey.
Which I think it's beautiful too. And you share that, like, all of this stuff, the last 10 years came out of this place of you, trying to figure things out for yourself. I love that part where we say, like, coaching is all about helping one person, like take one more step. You can always offer one step to the person in front of you. It doesn't have to be big and massive for you to make an impact and to help one person. So I love that this has been a journey for you where you kind of walk through these seasons and taken all this now and have a framework. And I think for me in my life, that's how I see the Lord. It doesn't always make sense. It's all these data points, right, that don't seem to be connected at the time. But I think like you just trust in him. And eventually they do. Eventually they do have a framework, or they start to make sense, or things start to level out. And I think that was really good.
Even what you said that pastor said at your sabbatical, when things don't make sense or when things are hard, it's when God's withdrawing the water and letting that root system grow in the dark where no one sees but us. Is like we're having to develop those practices of trusting. And it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. But I had read, Beth Moore has a book on the vine, Cultivating Vines. And of course, I was obsessed with all things, vine and all that. And she had gone apparently to a trip to Italy. And she says that someone shared with her that the vine loves the rocky soil because it has to work. And she learned that if the soil is too soft, like too easy to grow in, the vine will produce a lot of leaves, a lot of foliage. But if it's rocky and it's lacking water, like you said, and it's a little harder to, work the roots, the vine thinks it's dying. And so it produces the grapes because the grapes has the seed. So the vine is like, I can't just be showy with leaves. I actually have to reproduce myself. So I'm going to create fruit because the fruit has the seeds to continue, right? So that discipleship is in the grapes. It's not in the showy activity. It's in the fruit. And the fruit is others. What we had like that, connecting it to that thought of Jackie had shared.
Yeah.
And it's because the ground is hard. So it's beautiful. It's just all the picture that he's given us is just beautiful.
I don't know why that's super emotionally whatever for me, but I just, I don't know.
I mean, and isn't it consistent with what he says? Like we have to die to self. We have been crucified with him. Like all of that imagery of, we're just trying to reproduce ourselves.
And I think the part for me, like in this season, the part of that, I'm going to have to sit in that for a while, but it's like when really hard stuff comes, right? We often ask this question, like, what is the purpose of my pain? Like, where is the Father? Just that imagery of the plant thinks it's dying. And so it's like last ditch effort, like I got to make this fruit. I've got to make these grapes because that's where the seed will be. And it's just this sacrificial, almost this, I'm just like so many images are popping in my head, like the mom who gives her baby away. Like there's so much in that image of just in that really hard season of like, I've got nothing left. And I feel like you said, sometimes it's like, I don't know, in my own life, it's just coming to the cross and finding that space where you you don't have anything left but Jesus and the bathroom floor. And there's a beauty in that, a beauty in seeing the Father's heart and a beauty in all the things. And yeah. So anyway, I thought that was really good. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So if you were sitting at the coffee shop having coffee and you were talking to someone about your book, who's sitting on the other side of the table from you? And what do they need right now? And why would they need to buy your book?
I think my heart just like wants to jump out of my chest when I'm talking to somebody that is confused about what to do next. When they're like in transition, something's changing, right? Like their little kid's going to school for the first time, or they are quitting their job and trying to do something part-time, or trying to be more intentional with, a type of work they're doing, or empty nesters, or someone retiring, or like these transition points where they are like, see an opportunity to do things differently. Yeah. I think God calls us all along our lives, right? But sometimes I think we're just more attuned and more open to change. So I think that when someone already is feeling a pull by God, like I want to say, read this because you're going to get hit by questions and doubts and the enemy's lies. And I think this is a little bit of a primer to help you stay focused on God, focus on what he might want from you, how to deal with all this negative stuff that's going to get thrown at you. Because when we are in the path of doing the work we've been called to do, we are targets. We are targets. And so I used to be pretty brazen when I was involved in this one thing at my former church. And I would say like, oh, spiritual warfare, bring it. Like, I know I'm on track, And I was like, what am I thinking? Taunting the enemy. But nonetheless, right. That's the thing is like when you're doing what God's calling you to do or something that matters, you're going to be opposed. You're going to be opposed. And so someone that's kind of on the cusp of that is where I feel my book would be helpful. And in fact, if I could, I wrote in my acknowledgments at the very end, a little note to the ladies of my sisters at Called Creatives, which is how you and I met. Oh, can I read that?
Yes, please do. I've already cried once, so.
So I said, my called sisters in the Called Creatives community and elsewhere in ministry, this book is for you. My call is to help the body of Christ use their time, talents, and treasure for the sake of Jesus. Thinking of you has fueled this journey. Imagine if we were all trusting God as we walked in obedience to his leadership, ministering by the power of the Holy Spirit, loving him and loving people. I pray that you will learn to abide in him, dream God-sized dreams, and then live faithfully surrendered to his will. God's got you. May we all be set free for kingdom impact because we are being called for such a time as this. Let's go, ladies. I think that was the final push that I needed when I attended that getaway with you and when we met, because I was in the room with lots of women who are being called to do things and they were talking about it. And almost in the next breath, they spoke their fear or they spoke their whatever's holding them back. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the struggle that I've already sort of dealt with. I was just a few steps ahead. And I was like, I have to write this book because that is what it addresses. That place of I'm feeling called, but I'm afraid, or I'm feeling called, but is that really what I'm feeling? Like all the questions. Yeah. That's who this book's for.
Oh, that was so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just love you. Where can people find the book and find you if they want to reach out to you? Is there a certain platform or a way that they can get connected to you?
So I am on Instagram this fall, I'm finally turning my attention back to all of that after now that this book is launched. But my website is, my name, CristinaSlabic.com. Cristina with no H. I'm sure, I don't know, you probably will link it. But on there's a link for the book, and you can get the book on Amazon and other places that books are sold. And there's a place there if you want to contact me for, if you have questions about coaching. But I have some articles up. Again, like I said, I'm turning my attention back to that now that the book is launched. But my website is probably a good place. Get on my mailing list. That's where I share kind of what's coming up. And like I said, I'm going to be doing some retreats and then workshops for goal planning and get in the know. Yeah.
Yes. Super exciting. Maybe coming to North Carolina. We'll see how the
that would be so fun.
Works out. Yeah. Yeah. That would be super fun. I would love that. Well, thank you, friend, for coming on the show. It was a blessing. I'm super excited. Again, super proud of you. Good job.
Thank you, friend.
Way to go. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so proud. You're welcome. Hey, friends. Thanks for listening today with my coffee conversation with my friend Cristina. As you heard, she has a great heart and passion for helping you live out your calling with intention and confidence. So check out her new book, her website, and her coaching resources if you're interested in moving forward with intention. And also, don't forget to jump over to danitacummins.com to join the Entrusted to Lead community, where you can stay up to date on the latest episodes and receive tools and tips to help you lead yourself and others well. And you'll get a sneak peek at my book publishing adventure. My debut book comes out this fall, so stay tuned for details. And remember to keep showing up every day, even when it hurts, because you matter. Okay, friend, have an amazing day. I'll see you later.